Chapter 1 of Half Hours with the Idiot. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jeff Moon of Rochester, New York. Half Hours with the Idiot by John Kendrick Bangs. Chapter 1. As to ambassadors' residences. I am glad to see that the government is beginning to think seriously of providing ambassadors' residences at the various foreign capitals in which our ambassadors are accredited, said the Idiot, stirring his coffee with a small pocket thermometer and entering the recorded temperature of 58 degrees Fahrenheit in his little memorandum book. That's a thing we have needed for a long time. It has always seemed a humiliating thing to me to note the differences between the houses of our government officials of equal rank but unequal fortune abroad. To leave the home of an ambassador to Great Britain, a massive 16-story mausoleum looking like a collision between a Carnegie library and a state penitentiary, with 7 baths and 4 grand pianos on every floor, with guides always on duty to show you the way from your bedchamber to the breakfast room, and a special valet for each garment you wear from sock to collar, and go over to Rome to find your ambassador heating his coffee over a gas jet in a hall bedroom on the top floor of some dusty old palazzo overlooking the garage of the Spanish minister, is disconcerting to say the least. It may be a symptom of American fraternity, but it does not speak volumes for Western hemispherical equality, and the whole business ought to be standardized. An American embassy architecturally should not be either a twin brother to a Renaissance lunatic asylum or a replica of a $4,000 Ladies' Home Journal bungalow that can be built by the owner himself working Sunday afternoons for $800 exclusive of the plumbing.
"You are right for once, Mr. Idiot," said the bibliomaniac approvingly. "The last time I was abroad, traveling with one of those through Europe in 10 days parties, I could not make up my mind which was the more humiliating to me as an American citizen, the lavish ostentation of one embassy or the niggardly squalor of another. And it occurred to me then that here was a first-class opportunity for some patriot to come along and do his country's dignity some good by pruning a little in one piece and fattening things up a bit in another."
"Quite so," said the Idiot, inhaling a waffle.
"And I have been hoping," continued the bibliomaniac, "that Congress would authorize the purchase of suitable homes in foreign capitals for the purpose of correcting the evil."
"That's where we diverge, sir," said the Idiot, as the lady said to her husband when they got their first glimpse of the courthouse at Reno. "We don't want to purchase. We want to build. The home of an American ambassador should express America, not the country to which he is sent to embass. There's nothing in my mind less appropriate than to find a diplomat from Oklahoma named, let us say, Dinkelspiel, housed in a Louis XIV chateau on the Champs-Élysées, or a gentleman from Indiana, dwelling in the palace of some noble but defunct homicidal duck of the Sforza strain in Rome, or a leading Presbyterian, representing us at Constantinople, receiving his American visitors in a collection of bargain counter minarets formerly occupied by the secondary harem of the Sublime Porte. There is an incongruity about that sort of thing, that while it may add to the gaiety of nations, leaves Uncle Sam at the wrong end of the joke. When the thing is done, it ought to be done from the ground up. Uncle Sam should always feel at home in his own house, and I contend that he really couldn't feel that way in an ex-harem, or in one of those cold-storage Roman palazzos where the Borgias used to dispense cyanide of potassium frappé to their friends and neighbors. He doesn't fit into that sort of thing any more than he fits into those pink satin knee breeches and the blue cocked hat with rooster feathers that diplomatic usage requires him to wear when he goes to make a party call on the Tsar. So I am hoping that when Congress takes the matter up, it will consider only the purchase of suitable sites and then go on to adopt a standardized residence which from cellar to roof, from state salon to kitchen, shall express the American idea."
"You talk as if there were an American idea in architecture," said the doctor. "If there is such a thing to be found anywhere under the canopy, let's have it."
"Oh, it hasn't evolved yet," said the Idiot. "But it soon would be if we were to put our minds to it. We can be just as strong on evolution as we have always been on revolution if we only try. The first thing would be for us to recognize that in his fullest development up to date, the real American is a composite of everything that's best in all other nations. Take my humble self, for instance."
"What, again?" groaned the bibliomaniac. "Really, Mr. Idiot, You're worse than the measles. You can take that only once, but why, we've had you so often that it sometimes seems as if life were just one idiotic thing after another."
"Oh, all right," said the Idiot. "In that case, let's take you for a dreadful example. What are you, anyhow, Mr. Bibb, but the ultimate result of a highly variegated international complication in the matter of ancestry? Your father was English, your mother was German, your grandparents were Scotch, Irish, and Manx, with a touch of French on one side and a mixture of Hungarian, Danish, and Russian on the other. It is just possible that without knowing it you could also contain traces of Italian and Spanish. Your love of classic literature suggests that somewhere back in the ages of your forebears swarmed about Athens as a member of that famous clan, the hoi polloi. The touch of melancholy in your nature may be attributed to overindulgence in waffles, but it suggests also that Scandinavia had a hand in the evolution of your ego. In other words, sir, you are a sort of human pousse café, a mighty agreeable concoction, Mr. Bibb, though a trifle dangerous to tackle at breakfast. Now, as I wanted to say in the beginning when you intimated that I was in danger of becoming chronic, I am out of the same box of ancestral odds and ends that you are. I am a mixture of Dutch, French, English, and Manx, with an undoubted strain of either Ciceronian Roman or Demosthenean Greek thrown in. I'm not certain which, as is evidenced by my overwhelming predilection for the sound of my own voice."
"That much is perfectly clear," interjected the bibliomaniac, "though the too easy and over-continuous flow of your speech indicates that your veins contain some of the torrential qualities of the Ganges."
"Say rather the Mississippi, Mr. Bibb," suggested Mr. Brief. "The Mississippi has the biggest mouth." "Well, anyhow," continued the Idiot, unabashed, "whether my speech suggests the unearthly mystic beauty of the Ganges or the placid fructifying flow of the Mississippi, the fact remains that the best American type is a composite of all the best that human experience has been able to produce in the way of a featherless biped since Dr. Darwin's friend Simeon got rid of his tail, preferring to sleep quietly on his back in bed rather than to spend his nights swinging nervously to and fro from the limb of a tree. Since we can't deny this, let's make a virtue of it and act accordingly. What is more simple, then, than that a composite people should go in for a composite architecture to express themselves in marble, stone, and brick? Acting on this principle, let our architecture express the glory that was Greece, the grandeur that was Rome, the utility that was England, the economy that was Scotch, the espièglerie that was France, the simplicity that was Holland, and the efficiency that was Germany, not to mention the philandery that was Constantinople. The problem will be how to combine all these various strains and qualities into one composite building, and that, of course, will have to be solved by architects. It isn't a thing like banking that, under the theories of modern statesmanship, can be settled by chauffeurs, tobacconists, and undertakers, but will require expert handling. I don't know very much about architecture myself, but offhand I should say that the exterior of the building might be a combination of late Victorian Queen Anne, softened somewhat with Elizabethan suggestions of neo-Gothic Greco-Roman classicism, with a Byzantine fullness about the eaves, relieved with a touch of Hebridean French Renaissance manifested in the rococo quality of the pergola effect at the front, the whole building welded into a less inchoate mass by a very pronounced feeling of Georgian decadence, emphasized with a gambrel roof, and the facade decorated with flamboyant Dutch fire escapes, bringing irresistibly to mind the predominance in all American art of the Teutonic Doric, as shown by our tendency to gables supported by Moorish pilasters done in Hudson River brick. Not being an architect myself, I don't know that a building of that kind could be made to stand up, but we might experiment on the proposition by erecting a pan-European building in Washington, and see whether it would stand or not. If it could stand through one extra session of Congress without cracking, I don't see why it couldn't be put up anywhere abroad with perfect confidence that it should stay up through one administration anyhow. A nightmare of that kind erected in the capital city of a friendly power would be just cause for war to the knife, said Mr. Brief. Well, I have an alternate proposition, said the Idiot, and I am not sure that it isn't far better than the other. Why not erect a Statue of Liberty in every capital abroad, an exact reproduction of that monumental affair in New York Harbor, and let our ambassadors live in them? They tell me that there's as much room inside Liberty's skirts as there is in any 10-story apartment house, and there is no reason why it should not be utilized. My suggestion would be to have all the offices of the embassies in the pedestals, and let the ambassador and his family live in the overskirt. There'd be plenty of room left higher up in the torso for guest chambers, and in the uplifted arm for nurseries for the ambassadorial children, and the whole could be capped with a magnificent banquet hall on the rim of the torch, at the base of the brazen flame."
"A plan worthy of the gigantic intellect that conceived it," smiled the doctor. "But how would you have this thing furnished, Mr. Idiot? Would that be done by the ambassadors themselves, or would the President have to call a special session of Congress to tackle the job?"
"I was coming to that," said the Idiot. "It has occurred to me that it would be a fine thing to have 48 rooms in the statue, each named after one of our American states, and then leave it to each state to furnish its own room. This would lend to a pleasing variety to the inside of the building that could hardly fail to interest the visitor, and would give the foreigners a very clear insight into our resources along lines of interior decorations. Think of the Massachusetts room, for example. A fine old horsehair mahogany sofa in one corner, a rosewood highboy off in another, an old-fashioned four-poster bed projecting out into the middle of the room, and a blue china washbowl and pitcher on a spindle-legged washstand nearby. And on the wall 3 steel engravings, one showing John Hancock signing the Declaration of Independence, another of Charles Sumner preaching emancipation, and a third showing Billy Sunday trying to sweep back the waves of a damp Boston from the sand dunes of a gradually drying Commonwealth. Then the Michigan room would be a corker, lavishly filled with antique furniture fresh from Grand Rapids, and a bronze statue of Henry Ford at each end of the mantelpiece for symmetry's sake, the ceiling given over to a symbolical painting entitled The Confusion of Bacchus, reproducing scenes in Detroit when announcement was made that the good old state had voted for grape juice as the official tipple. Missouri's room could be a thing of beauty and a joy forever, with its lovely wallpaper showing her favorite sons, Dave Francis and Champ Clark alternately, separated by embossed hound dogs, rampant, done in gilt bronze, and the state motto "Show Me" in red, white, and blue tiles over the fireplace. Really, I can't imagine anything more expressive of all American than that would be. Florida could take the palm room, New York the rather frigid and formal white and gold reception room. Maine, as the leading cold water state of the Union, could furnish the bathrooms. California could provide a little cafeteria affair for a quick lunch in mission style, and, owing to her preeminence in literature, the library could be turned over to Indiana, with every assurance that if there were not books enough to go around, every one of her deservedly favorite sons, from George Ade to George McCutcheon, would write a 5-foot shelfful at any time to supply the deficiency. Murally speaking, a plan of this sort could be made historically edifying also. Florida could supply a handsome canvas showing Ponce de Leon discovering Palm Beach. In the New Jersey room, the Battle of Trenton could be shown, depicting the retreat of Jim Smith and the final surrender of democracy to General Wilson. Ohio could emphasize in an appropriate medium the discovery of the oil fields by Mr. Rockefeller. Pennsylvania could herald her glories with a mural painting apotheosizing William Penn and Andrew Carnegie in the act of forging her heart of steel in the fires of immortality, kept burning by a never-ending stream of bonds poured forth from the end of a cornucopia by Fortune herself. An heroic figure of Governor Blease defying the lightning would come gracefully from South Carolina, and Rhode Island, always a most aristocratic little state, could emphasize the descent of some of her favorite sons from Darwin's original inspiration by a frieze depicting a modern tango party at Newport, in which the preservation of the type, and a possible complete reversion thereto, should be made imperishly obvious to all beholders. Then, to make the thing consistent throughout, the homes of ambassadors having been standardized, Congress should order a standard uniform for her representatives abroad. This would settle once and for all the vexed question as to what an ambassador shall wear when presented to King this or Emperor that or the Ponkapog of Thingabob. I think it ought to be a definitely established principle that every nation should be permitted to choose its own official dud, but not the duds of others. There is no reason in the world why the King of England should be permitted to dictate the styles of garment an American ambassador shall wear. Suppose he ordered him to attend a 5 o'clock tea clad in yellow pajamas, trimmed with red plush fringe and gold tassels emerging from green rosettes. It would be enough to send the eagle screaming, and to justify the sending of a commission of protest headed by Mr. Bryan over to London to slap Mr. Lloyd George on the wrist. Nor should the Kaiser be permitted to say how an American representative shall dress when calling upon him, compelling him to appear perhaps in a garb entirely unsuited to his style of beauty. Something like the uniform of a glorified white wing, for instance, decorated with peacock feathers and wearing an alpine hat with a stuffed parrot lying flat on its back on the peak, on his head. That sort of thing does not gee with our pretensions. We are a free and independent nation, and it is time to assert our independence of the sartorial shackles those foreign potentates would fasten upon us. Let the fiat go forth that hereafter all American ambassadors, wheresoever accredited, shall wear a long blue swallow-tail coat with brass buttons, and 48 stars, lit by electricity from a small battery concealed in the pistol pocket, appliqued on the tails. Red and white striped doe-skin trousers, skin tight, held down by straps under the boots, and an embroidered waistcoat, showing a couple of American eagles standing on their hind legs and facing the world with a defiant cry of "We pluribus us." The whole topped off with a bell-crowned fuzzy beaver hat, made with silver-gray plush, which shall never be removed in the presence of anybody, peasant or potentate, plutocrat or cook tourist. If, in addition to these items, the ambassador were compelled to wear a long yellow chin-whisker, it would be just the liveriest livery that ever came down the pike from Brumelian splendor. It would emphasize the presence of the American ambassador wherever he went, and make the effete nations of Europe, Asia, Africa, and Pan-America sit up and take notice.
"Doubtless," said the bibliomaniac, rising impatiently. "And do you suppose the President could find any self-respecting American in or out of jail who would be willing to wear such a costume as that?"
"Well," said the idiot, "of course some of 'em might object, but I'll bet you $4.87 worth of doughnuts against a Chautauqua rain check that any man who offered you $17,500 a year for wearing those duds without having the money to back the offer up would find your name at the head of the list of his preferred creditors in less than 3 shakes of a lamb's tail." End of chapter 1.